Welcome back to the official Atari Games podcast. This is a fun one. I am joined by Larry Kuperman, Director of Business Development at Nightdive Studios. Larry, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Jason. Thanks a lot for the warm greeting.
Absolutely. So before we get in, this is going to be a lot about Nightdive, and it's really going to be a lot about Larry, but we got to do some rigmarole first, a little bit of housekeeping. This is going to drop, I think I said on the last podcast, we're going to talk about Quamp 2 with Graphite. That's actually been bumped, so we're going to talk about that closer to the release in the next episode. But in the moment, you could still wishlist Quamp 2, and you should also wishlist Lunar Land or Beyond, both of those coming soon. And join the Discord, the official Atari Discord. All those links are down in the description. And I usually say this at the end, but let me say this up front. If you're listening, if you're back, if you like this, feel free to review us, please, on podcast services. That really helps out the algorithms. So thank you for that if you've done it, and we'd appreciate if you do it. Now, let's shift gears. That was like the speediest run through ever. Larry, you're with Nightdive. Atari has acquired Nightdive last year. I got the news when I was walking down the streets of San Francisco at GDC. And I said, wow, I think some profanity was said, but I don't want to censor myself. That's just more work in post-production. What have you been up to since then?
Well, it's been a pretty great year. It's really funny when the news came out, and again, the deal was actually finalized at GDC last year. In fact, bit of trivia for you. There's always some papers that need to be signed. The last papers that actually made the deal binding and official, you can't go back after that, were actually signed in my hotel room at GDC by Stephen Kick and myself. And then a funny story. After you do that, you've kind of crossed the Rubicon. It's all final. But then you get a notice that because Atari is a publicly traded company, and because there are rules governing that, you can't say anything until there's been an official announcement. But there was no timetable that let us know when that official announcement would actually take place. So we went on about our GDC business that day, and we were at PC Gamer's party when the news broke, when my phone started blowing up. I was with some of the journalists that we've worked with in the past, and people that I regard as friends. Evan Lottie, editor there, Tyler, and Wes Fenlon. We were standing around talking when my phone blew up, and I never look at my phone, but it just kept on going until I pulled it out and I found that the story had been published on Yahoo Finance, that it was now official, that announcement had been made, and it was now public knowledge. And must have been something in my face after I looked at my phone, because when I looked up, everyone was looking at me. And I just turned my phone around to the three journalists and I said, well, I know what story you're writing as soon as we leave. So that was how that happened. Funny thing about last year, a lot of our fans, and Nightdive is very fortunate. We have a very loyal fan base. A lot of our fans were concerned that we weren't going to be doing any more, cool retro games that are Nightdive's stock and trade. People have referred to us as the masters of the remaster, and all that we did in the remaining 9 months of 2023 was release System Shock remake, Quake 2, Rise of the Triad limited edition, and then finish the year off strong with Turok 3 and the Turok bundle. So no, things were not going to change, at least not the concerns that fans had. 2023 was an epic year for us. Excuse me. Shouldn't use the word epic. I don't want to start any rumors.
Lowercase e.
Lowercase e.
Yeah, it's all good.
And 2024 looks to be a pretty good year also. Next month, I guess fans already know about this, but next month we're really excited for the release of Star Wars Dark Forces.
That's right. So you should go wishlist that.
Absolutely.
Anything else you want to talk about for 2024? Or is that all hush hush at this point?
It's all hush hush. We have a very full slate of games. If everything goes off as planned, we will have 5 releases. We're also working very closely with our publisher and our partner with PlayOn on the release of the console builds of System Shock 2 Remake. Um, those will be out soon, TM, and fans will be excited. I think with not only the quality of the work, but also some of the new content that they will see for the first time.
Very cool. So, if for people who've been listening to the podcast, about I don't know, maybe a few months ago at this point, I did a one-on-one with Ethan Stearns, our VP of games, and basically the core of the episode was just me throwing out 5 random questions, some gaming related, some not gaming related, and I'm going to do the same thing with Larry here. I got 5 questions that we're going to go through, but before we get into it, this doesn't count. Okay, so this is like the bonus preamble question, so we can tee this up. Larry, tell me about yourself and what you do at Night Dive.
So as you mentioned, I'm head of business development. I work with all of our external partners. I like to say that I don't make the games; I make the deals that make the games. I also, part of my job is also to work with the platforms. And then because we're still a small company, I am still very much involved with the actual development of the titles. Really, I describe my role as being the facilitator. If someone needs something, either hardware or software, um, I'm the kind of go to guy that will take care of that for them.
Very cool. Well, with that, why don't we jump into the first question?
I'm afraid, but go ahead.
Don't be afraid. There's nothing to be afraid of with these questions. They're meant to be fun. They're meant to spur conversation. And I hope they'll create some interesting results here. So, if we're familiar with the hero's journey, right?
Yes.
Hero's journey always starts with the inciting incident. So, I want to know, what was the inciting incident that led to your video game career?
I can tell you the exact moment. So I had used computers at work through the beginning in the 1980s. I know 40 years that I've been doing this. The first work computer that I used, I'd get into work early, and I would put in the DOS boot disk because you had to cold boot the computer to get the operating system running. That was back in the early days. And then in 1990 or 91, I bought my first computer, my first personal computer. Actually, that's not true. My first computing device that I owned at home was a Commodore 64, which I tricked out with all the peripherals. Um, had a dot matrix printer, and I had a blazing fast Hess data modem, 300 baud. You could
These are
see
words that
tech.
mean things, I
You you
imagine.
could you could see text as long as it was black on a white background. But that was really pretty cool. I used that. I was living in New York at the time. Something that as a New Yorker you'll kind of get to. So I lived in the North Bronx then, and my school was City University was Bernard M. Baruch on 23rd Street. Um, this is only for the New Yorkers in the audience, but we used to call it UCLA. It was the university on the corner of Lexington Avenue, UCLA. Um, and the really cool thing about my computer stuff and my this fancy modem was that I could connect to the computer at school, do my programming, and back in those days you printed out everything on green bar paper, and I would do the print command, and then 24 hours later when I went down to school it would be there waiting for me, which was a whole lot better than schlepping from the North Bronx down to Lower Manhattan. But so I had that Commodore 64, and then I moved up to a real machine, a powerhouse, It was a brand new 486 with the upgraded memory. It had 2 megs of RAM. No, I did not misspeak. There were two 1 megabyte um, memory chips in there, and it had no discrete video card or CD-ROM because those weren't quite invented yet. But one of the games that I played was Wolfenstein 3D,
Yes.
and there was a moment when I physically realized that was my hand holding the gun in the screen, and that was the moment that I said, "Wow, these video games are kind of cool."
That's awesome that it was Wolfenstein of all of the games it could have been.
I uh,
That was the one.
I got to work. You know, it's known that we've had a number of projects working with Bethesda, with ZeniMax, now part of Microsoft. I actually got to work with the one and only Kevin Cloud, and I believe that he was the hand model for that game.
That's awesome. That's pretty cool, that trajectory to go from working to like being inspired by the original first person shooter. And now a lot of your bread and butter is like those first person shooters. But we'll get back to that in a future question.
But that was,
Um,
that was my epiphany. That was when I said, oh, this is really cool.
yeah, that's awesome. You mentioned you're from New York. I actually changed on the fly the question I was going to ask here. Um, Not game related, like I said, they're not all game related. How many places have you lived in? How many different cities have you lived in, and how would you rank them?
So
How, and you could elaborate as much as you'd like.
sure. So I originally come from the Bronx. Um, the Bronx. It's the only part of New York that's actually attached to the rest of America. Um, I grew up there. I make no bones about my age. I lived there. I lived there before they built Co-op City over what used to be Freedom Land. Just saying. And before it was Freedom Land, it was a landfill. And one might say about Co-op City, it's the only time in the history of the world that somebody has done a project that ruined a landfill. Um, but I lived in New York. I lived for a long time in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Um, but my journey was not quite linear. After we moved from New York to Ann Arbor, I ended up moving back and lived in Mayapack, New York, and then in Bound Brook, New Jersey, for a little while. Um, Neither of those would rate as my favorite places. I refer to the time that I lived in New Jersey as the dark times, which just goes to show my prejudice as a New Yorker.
That's New Jersey.
Um, yeah, and after living in Ann Arbor for a number of years, living in Michigan, I came to the decision that I'd had enough snow in my life, so I moved out to Las Vegas, and I've been out here for about 5.5 years, and I really enjoy the life out in Vegas. It's a funny thing. Just like New Yorkers never do any of the tourist things. I hardly ever go to the Strip except when I'm either for shows like Dice coming up next month, or when I have friends from out of town that haven't seen the Strip. Um, but mostly I hang out in the Henderson area, and the idea that just having endless alternatives of where to eat, what kind of food. You know, it reminds me very much of New York in that aspect. So
Yeah, it is an underrated culinary town. Like Lotus of Siam is like one of the best Thai restaurants.
and that's part
Period.
of the Las Vegas Chinatown area, which again, if you only come to the Strip, you'll never see. The things that also brought me, that also persuaded me was I really enjoy Red Rocks out here, and everybody should see Valley of Fire at least once.
Yeah, cool. There's a couple places. You talk, you throw a little shade towards the Strip, but there are. I've been making this case that there are few places in the world that gather the best of stuff from around the world, and Vegas is one of those places. New York is one of those places. I'd argue Tokyo is one of those places. Dubai, oddly enough, is also one of those places. But Vegas is undeniably one of those places where all of a
Where
sudden you have
where
this hankering for something, you can get it.
where else can you see both the Empire State Building and the Eiffel Tower walking distance from each other? Um,
Exactly. Exactly.
so yeah,
It's a
no, and no, that's a great, but it's not to dissuade anybody from the stuff on the Strip. It's just that there is more to Vegas than
Oh,
just the Strip.
absolutely. Yeah. Now, would you believe it that, you said you left Michigan to get away from the snow? I've been to Vegas. The first time I went to Vegas was for CES in, I want to say, 2011, and I had the flu. It snowed, and I stayed at the original Sahara.
So, so when I drove from Michigan to Las Vegas, coming from Michigan, of course, I was driving a Subaru. Of course, I was driving a four-wheel drive, car.
Sure.
And the first winter that I was here, we had a Las Vegas snowfall, around an inch of snow. First of all, watching all the kids that were trying to ride on the sleds that their parents had bought them was really funny. Um, but the other thing was, I took a picture of these four snowflakes on the rear window of my Subaru and sent it back to my family in Michigan, where it was a balmy negative 17 degrees, with a note that said, "It snowed here. We will rebuild."
I like that. All right. Let's get back to talking about some games here.
Sure.
Um Recently, Steam officially added the boomer shooter tag.
Yep.
And I want to know, what do you think of the term boomer shooter?
I think it's fine, and I think it's funny. That day I was when we did Rise the Triad, the Ludicrous edition. That was in partnership with our friends, and I don't use that word lightly, with the team over at New Blood and the good folks over at Apogee Games. And so I was actually talking the first time that I heard that Steam had done that. It was Dave Oshery that said that let us know about that, and I think we all agreed. If it makes the games easier to find, and again, I don't know how many people in the audience are familiar with, I mean, truly the boomer shooter guys that are reinventing it over at New Blood.
Oh yeah.
How many people have played some of their titles, especially Dusk.
Oh
But
yeah. If you haven't played Dusk,
yeah,
what are you doing?
exactly. But if it makes it easier, if those things bubble up, that's fine. And as a true boomer, I don't find anything offensive about the title. Sure, it's the games that there was nothing like that before we came along, so we invented it.
Right. I guess it's a good way to differentiate. You know what you're looking for. You know what the
Yeah,
expectations are. Like, I'm playing games. I didn't realize the term was even a thing until, let's see. I played Dusk, then I played Proteus, and then I played Ion Fury. So kind of like bounced around all over the place, like hitting all these great games. Like, man, I just love this retro style, and it's like
yeah.
cool to put this in a specific bucket where it has like that kind of grit. How would you define it? How would you define a boomer shooter?
I think you used the real. Or first of all, it has to have that retro look and feel. You can have the same mechanics, but if the game looks like Cyberpunk 2077, that's probably not a boomer shooter, right? It's got to have that kind of grittiness, that pixelized art style. That's the first part about it. The second part about it, I think, is that those games really focus heavily on the mechanics. It's not just what you do, but how you do it. And I think that that's what makes those games so special.
Totally. I love them. I think they're great. Bring them on. Um, I have so many in the wish list right now. You mentioned New Blood. I think the game I played the most on my Quest 3 has been a medieval VR.
Oh,
Yeah, and that's just so cool. Even at that speed in VR, it's awesome. It just makes me happy.
absolutely. And we're not quite there with VR yet, although we're getting closer. But I think that when VR, when VR really hits that right balance between performance and price, um, I think that you're going to see a resurgence of those games because they're just so much fun.
Yeah, and you're like kind of limiting the controls. One of my fear by moving that to VR was it's too fast. It'll be thrown up all over the place, and they play with elevators and any sort of movement where you like move up and down.
Yeah,
But however they did it, they pulled it off well. Or I didn't get motion sickness. I felt great, and it just worked without a hitch. And the other good thing about those games, because they have that retro vibe to it, they're not as graphically intensive as other
absolutely.
games, so they don't
Yeah,
need it. It's very cool. So
that's absolutely true. And the technology hurdles, it's low. The bar is set very low on that. I mean, you can do a great representation of what those games look and feel like without having the highest level of graphical fidelity.
do you put a now if you're going to call it boomer shooter, boomer related to the era, what is the cutoff year then? Like, okay, let me
I,
let me give you a perfect example. Right, you have I mentioned Ion Fury,
yep.
and then the sequel that they're releasing is Phantom Fury, which very much feels like a game out of the early 2000s. Is that technically a boomer shooter?
I think it can be, and let me just also say I don't think that Boomer Shooter is limited by dates. I think Boomer Shooter is more of a stylistic approach.
Sure, totally fair. Well, we can leave it there then. All right, let's get to this next question. I'm kind of curious about this one. I can't go a podcast without talking about food. I still want Run Amok Maple to give me some free product, even though I don't do sponsorships on this. Um,
But it
but
never
look,
hurts to ask. Go ahead.
exactly, totally. Send me the sparkly syrup. Look back 2 episodes to the mailbag for that. You and me, we have a commonality in that we both have we are both Jewish, and I want to know from you, what is the best and what is the worst Jewish, I'll put that in quotes, food?
So I'm pretty open in my diet. Let me say that some of the best deli that I've had ever has been outside of New York. And as somebody that grew up in the Bronx and made pilgrimage to Katz's, or the Second Avenue Deli, I know that sounds that sounds very very edgy and controversial, but when I moved out to Ann Arbor, famous restaurant Ann Arbor Zingerman's, known for their corned beef, their pastrami, their sandwiches that are bigger than your head. Um, while that's great, the one thing that I have never found outside of New York that has lived up to the quality of what I remember from New York was New York style deli knishes, the square ones, not the really authentic roundish ones, but the square ones. I've just never been able to get that taste. Why is it so good? I'm not sure it was so good, but it brings back the memory of one's childhood. That's what it does for me. Um,
It's the taste of nostalgia.
it's the taste of nostalgia, right?
I
And,
make
and
I make the joke that like you walk into Katz's and it's so dirty, it feels grimy, but that grime is part of the flavor.
absolutely.
If they clean that place one time, it's over.
both
Forget it.
both figuratively and literally. But
Yeah.
so while a knish might be on the top of the list, there are things that I've never been able to quite wrap my head. I've never been a big borscht fan, but more than borscht, my mom used to have shav, which is also a cold soup. It is green with pieces floating in it, and
Pieces of borscht.
I don't know what it is
Oh, just
pieces
pieces
of,
of things, matter,
but
physical matter.
but Jason, it's the kind of food that looks the same going down as it would coming back up.
Oh
um,
god.
I don't know how to put it anywhere. And while it might be the most delicious thing in the world,
Hmm,
I've never gotten past the look to actually try it. So um, that was that.
yeah.
But other than that, I mean, I'm pretty eclectic with with taste. If it doesn't run away from me, I'll probably try to eat it.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never really had the taste. No, the deli, yeah, that's top tier. That's the best. As far as the worst, I'd say anything on a Seder plate. Like that's not. There's a reason why you only eat that one time a year.
Yeah.
I mean, that goes for most of the holidays. Like no one's ever going around being like, you know, we could use some parsley. Let's just get some parsley in here.
Well, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but it's one that we tell a lot. All Jewish holidays follow the same format. They tried to kill us, we survived. Let's eat.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I do make the comment that anytime somebody says happy blank, I'm like, there's no happy holidays. They're all depressing if you look at it. It's like, yeah, we were sieged and now we're celebrating the little bit of light that lasted 8 days.
Yeah,
Let's not talk about our ransacked synagogue. It's absolutely,
find the little spot of sunshine.
yeah. This is also not like a negative. It's not that I don't like it, but I do hold some animosity for my family and for like presenting to me what brisket is and not and like not exposing what really is the best food of all time, which is Southern style slow cooked barbecue brisket.
So back in the days before he was creepy and back when he was still funny in one of Woody Allen's earliest movies, he talks about his childhood and about how his mother would run the chicken through the deflavorizing machine. I I always like that one. It
That's
was
good
something
stuff.
that I could relate to. It's funny. It's certainly not unique with me. I've been cooking since I was a teenager, um, and when people ask me, why I learned to cook, it wasn't so much passion. It was self defense. So
How do you figure?
oh, well, you know how they talk about Louisiana and panned blackened foods.
Yeah.
My mom invented that way before.
Oh. This has got to be like a Jewish mother thing because it's like the more burnt, the better.
That's right.
With my family, it's insane. It's like she'd make these oven potatoes, and if they weren't like black on top, forget it.
Then they
And I was
weren't
like, oh,
cooked.
I'll
Yeah.
take the pieces that look like potatoes. Thank you. That sounds more up my alley. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. All right, here we go. My last question on the list here. Was there a golden age for games, or are we in it now, or are we not there yet?
You know, I was on an interview back at the tail end of last year, and when I was asked to summarize the state of the game industry, I said it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. We are producing some amazing games. You have to feel sorry for the poor guys that thought they had all the awards locked up, and then Baldur's Gate 3 came out. I mean, we yes, last year was just a wonderful year for games all around. Again, very proud. We won a number of honors for the System Shock remake. Um, you know, really had an outstanding reception for that. But then we look around at the rest of the industry, and what 7,000, 8,000 people lost their jobs, and it hasn't stopped. I mean, we're heading up to close to 4,000 people laid off in 2024, and we're not done with January yet. So that's really concerning. Uh, I've said my comment about that was it's going to impact the business. because people aren't going to want to become game developers. They're not going to want to become game artists, because there's just no stability to it. Now, having said that, Night Dive has done pretty well. One of the many things, and not an answer to your question, but you know these things. Working with Atari, being part of Atari, has given us um, infrastructure that we did not have before, access to accounting, to legal, to administrative. We now have a human resources person that our team members can talk to, and they're accessible. I mean, we're at that kind of sweet spot where the Atari organization now, with our sister company Digital Eclipse, that we're big enough to have resources, but small enough that everybody on board has met the CEO. Um, so we're in a golden good stage there, but but I'm really worried about our industry. That said, I have friendships with many of the really venerable people, in our business. I've been privileged enough to work with Paul Neurath and the legendary Warren Spector, and we're tied together through the thread of System Shock as well as other things. But you stop and you look and say, well, Looking Glass Studios made System Shock 1, System Shock 2, and then went out of business. So things have always been this way. Somebody said it. It was said, humorously, tongue in cheek, that anytime you take a job, and the first thing that they start telling you is that we're all very passionate here. The author of the meme said, there's going to be some human rights abuses coming down the road, and many of us, the same position in a akin industry would pay more, would have better benefits, and would have greater stability. So we're all here for the love of games, and at a certain point, that just doesn't pay your rent. So that's a long answer. I do worry about the state of the industry as a whole, but man, we are producing some wonderful games.
Yeah. So do you think there was ever like a was there a better time then that kind of hit a more balance of stability with quality?
Um, we all did pretty well during COVID, when when money was loose, and everybody was staying home and playing video games. I'm not hoping for another pandemic to right the ship, but no, I think everything goes in cycles. Let me say this. At heart, I am a capitalist. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing business development. Um, Anytime we look at companies that are forced into layoffs, that have to do that, anytime 500, 1,000 people lose their job at a company, you have to remember that company was the same company that gave them the jobs in the first place. That maybe they were too aggressive in hiring up. Maybe the 6 months or a year that you worked for one of those companies was just a windfall for you. So I don't know. I don't think I think that we go through cycles. I think that those cycles tend to repeat. That there's always booms and busts in every industry, and we're just going through a tough time now.
Yeah, true. All right. Well, thanks for that. Well, that was it. That was the end of my 5 questions. Um, Hopefully there was no nothing too troublesome in there.
No, those were a lot of fun, and they really did make me think, especially about foods. Except now I'm hungry,
I'm sorry, but don't worry.
but
We'll get
but
you. We'll
I
get you out of
but
here
I
soon enough.
but I can push through.
Great. All right. Well, this also doesn't count as a question. This is just how we usually end these podcasts, which is going through what we're playing. So, Larry, what are you playing?
So I'm going to reveal a secret, for a guy that makes makes his living off of retro games. When I get done with my day, if you want to know what my secret playing vice is, it's Zen Pinball. I've been working with those guys, known those guys for a long time, and it takes me back to my youth. Um, I don't want to say it's an addiction for me, um, but I do own 120 of their tables, so maybe it is.
Well,
Um,
you're a collector. You're a collector. That's not an addiction. You're a collector. It's a different thing. It's completely different.
there's a fine line between those two, Jason. But that's my go-to, and the reason that I enjoy it so much. First of all, they have a number of game themed pinball games. So I'm not that far away from things that I love, but it is just pure escape for me. I don't have to think about what I'm doing. I just have to hit that little silver ball. And again, it takes me back to my youth. It takes me back to the games that I played when I wore a younger man's clothes.
Do you have a favorite pinball table, like physical table?
Uh, uh, yes and no. I have several in the physical stuff. So one other thing about Las Vegas.
I'm waiting. Yes, I was
This is
gonna
also
say it. If
this is
you didn't
also
say it, I was gonna say it. Yeah.
the home of the Pinball Hall of Fame.
Oh, so
Um,
cool. So
so
cool.
I've always been a fan of the medieval game with pop up trolls. That's been it was a midway title, I believe, and that's always been one that's just been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Also, shout out to Kirby's Pinball on the Game Boy because that, ah man, that's a great pinball game. That's so good. Pinball boss
And that
fights. Come
brings
on.
that brings up the whole thing about mashups and some of the unlikely ones that you wouldn't think of. But yeah, yeah,
All right. As for myself, I always play a lot of games. This is like 2 games ago, but I felt like it was apt for this discussion because I honestly feel like this is a game that Nightdive will inevitably remaster in 20 years, and that is Evil West by Flying Wild Hog. Are you familiar?
absolutely. We were just talking about it the other day. In fact,
Oh, really?
doing some comparisons, and that was one of the titles that came up.
Okay, so I think as we talk about this and we share common interests and talk about boomer shooters, I think one of the nostalgia points of that I have is I like a game that's just like no frills that I could jump into and play, right? And I don't need like I love a good Assassin's Creed game. Like I love that kind of Ubisoft open world game. Cool.
Yep.
Love that. Not always what I'm looking for. Sometimes I just want something dumb. Dumb, go forward. Go
So
forward and oh, there's a crate. Punch the crate. Now go forward again. Like give me
so
that.
so let me just push back and say it's not dumb. And one of the things
Fair
that
enough.
I learned in the time approaching a decade of doing these retro titles is that what was fun back then will be fun now. Yeah, the audience has changed. The fun part of games hasn't. And
Right.
and there's nothing quite like immersing yourself in something that the whole point is you don't have to think about.
Exactly. And I think lack of thought is inherently not smart, which in that case is dumb, but it's dumb fun. And you're right. I shouldn't use the derogatory term because I played through this game from beginning to end, and I wouldn't have done it if I didn't like it. There is so much content out there that just the completion of a game is a compliment in and of itself. And I
Absolutely.
completed this game and I loved it. It was just no frills, straightforward, always giving you new stuff. I love what Flying Wild Hog has done with the Shadow Warrior series. I played
Yep.
all 3 of those. They were a blast. And this game was awesome. I actually thought it was going to be another shooter. And then I go in, I'm like, oh, this is more of a beat 'em up brawler. This is kind of their take on almost like what if we made a God of War, like a new God of War light?
Yeah.
And I dug it. And the fact that it's just like, hey, your level's done. Oh, cool. I could get up and leave. I like that. I like games with levels. Shout out to Lunar Lander. Shout out to Quant 2. I like games with levels. And this did it. It looked great. I love the style, like the mashup of the Old West with the vampires and all these other things. I like that Abe Lincoln is in this game just because he's in
That's
a
right.
photograph. That was wild. Yeah. Evil West, I recommend it. It's on PlayStation Plus. That's where I played it, but it's been on my radar for a while. There's a little bit of a window, and yeah, I do recommend that. So that was some good stuff. Yeah, shout out to Flying Wild Hog. And that's it. We are officially at the end.
Hey,
Larry,
as we bid everybody do, I just want to say this is my first time as a guest. Hopefully, not the last.
definitely
But
not.
thank you very much for hosting this. And it's really important for people in our audience to know that 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 the relationship between Night Dive, Atari, and Digital Eclipse is one of fun, of camaraderie, and I don't believe that we have had a single meeting that somebody hasn't said something funny or there hasn't been something that we've all enjoyed laughing together and that we all enjoy each other's company.
It's mostly Larry. I mean, Larry's really the one who's inciting that. You wanna give us a quick one?
I promised that I would keep this one clean. So
Okay.
and I don't know any clean jokes because I don't think there are any.
Okay, fair enough. And yes, I completely echo that. Mike Mika was just here in the office last week. He won't escape this. He won't escape me long enough. We will get him on eventually. Larry, you'll definitely be back. Got some more of the Night Dive team on, maybe to talk about one of the upcoming projects. That'll be great. And yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for joining. Where can people find you if they're searching for you?
Nightdive, www.nightdivestudios.com. And you can always find me on Twitter under Larry Nightdive.
Cool. And that'll be linked in the description below as well. You can find me on Twitter at Jays of Doom. Please continue to give us feedback, comments. I read them on YouTube. You could also post in the Discord. Again, that link is in the description below. Please submit questions, anything you have. If you have ideas for the podcast, happy to hear those as well. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers.